The spring of 1940 was a time when the phony war in the West finally gave way to fierce armed conflict that engulfed Scandinavia. Operation Weserübung, the German invasion of Denmark and Norway, was not just another territorial seizure. It was a complex, multi-layered strategic chess game where the main players were not only armies, but also maritime communications and resource logistics. To understand why Hitler dared to take this risky step, we must look at the map of Europe at that time. The German economy was critically dependent on iron ore supplies from Sweden. A significant portion of this ore was exported through the Norwegian port of Narvik, which was the only ice-free port in the region during winter. Understanding this bottleneck of the German war machine, the British Admiralty actively considered the possibility of mining Norwegian waters or even occupying strategic points in the country under the guise of protecting neutrality. The German command, aware of these threats, began preparations for the operation with unprecedented secrecy. For the first time in history, such a large-scale landing was carried out, combining the actions of the Navy, ground forces, and the Air Force, Luftwaffe. It was the Blitzkrieg paradigm, transferred to the maritime theater of operations. The main goal was to outpace the British by a few hours or even days by capturing key ports from Oslo to Narvik with simultaneous strikes. It is important to understand the psychological state of the sides. For the British, Norway was a balcony door to Germany, while for Germany, it was an unsinkable aircraft carrier. In this first phase of the operation, the Germans used the element of surprise. All main points were attacked almost simultaneously, but Narvik became a special case. Here, the German group of destroyers that delivered the landing force fell into a trap set by the British fleet. This happened accidentally when British ships unexpectedly appeared at the entrance to the fjord. Thus began one of the most dramatic chapters of the war at sea, where narrow rocky shores and deep fjord waters turned into a deadly trap for modern ships. The battles for Narvik became a real test. When the British destroyer flotilla, under the command of Bernard Warburton Lee, entered the fjord on April 10, 1940, the Germans did not expect such a daring maneuver. In the morning fog, the British ships launched a sudden attack, but the price of success was a series of clashes where victory was measured by the number of surviving ship hulls. The most dramatic moment was the second phase when the battleship HMS Warspite entered the narrow Ofot fjord. It was a rare case where a ship of this class was forced to engage in direct fire against German destroyers hiding behind rocks. During these battles, we observed the phenomenon of confined space, where destroyers turned into targets. Furthermore, the battles for Narvik reflected the general crisis of British naval strategy at the time. Every day of the battle turned the fjords into a graveyard of ships, and the courage of sailors on both sides became a hostage to the ambitions of the High Command. After the guns fell silent in Narvik, it became obvious that Operation Weserübung was not just a local episode of the naval war. It was a clash that outlined the contours of future great battles. Although Germany entrenched itself in Norway, the strategic cost of this success proved to be extremely high. The loss of 10 modern destroyers effectively bled the German surface fleet for the coming years, when the question of preparing for a landing on the British Isles as part of Operation Sea Lion arose a few months later. The German command realized with horror that it lacked enough battle-ready ships to support the landing and maintain communications. Thus, the Norwegian campaign became one of the key factors that forced Hitler to abandon the attempt at a direct invasion of Britain. Great Britain also learned bitter lessons from these events. The losses of the Royal Navy forced the Admiralty to revise the doctrine of using large combat units in coastal operations. It became clear that even the most powerful battleships could not feel safe without absolute air superiority. A final analysis of the operation leads us to understand that Weserübung was the beginning of the end of the classical period of naval warfare. It showed a transition to total conflict, where the boundaries between the home front and the front line blur. The experience of Narvik became a foundation for the strategies of the following years, requiring greater flexibility and the realization that any naval victory is fragile if it is not supported by superiority in the skies. The Norwegian campaign remained in history as a preface to the tectonic shifts that forever changed the face of the world in the mid-20th century.